The dusty winds of Montana Territory carried whispers of illness through Clifton Hill in the summer of 1876. But no one spoke louder about Rachel Zimmerman's mysterious affliction than Rachel herself, and no one seemed to listen except for Isaac Edwards, the newcomer whose quiet confidence stood out among the skeptics. Rachel wiped her brow with trembling fingers, staring at the beads of sweat that collected there despite the cool morning. This was the third day in a row she'd woken feeling as though her blood had turned to molten iron, burning her from within. At 22, she had never experienced anything like this persistent fever that came and went without warning, accompanied by joint pains that sometimes left her unable to stand. "You're just overworked," her father had insisted yesterday when she'd collapsed while helping in their general store. All these newfangled notions about women's education have you reading too much and sleeping too little. Rachel knew better. Something was wrong inside her body, something that couldn't be explained away by her father's outdated beliefs or the town doctor's dismissive diagnosis of female hysteria. She forced herself to dress, willing her legs to support her weight. The Zimmerman general store wouldn't run itself, especially not with the summer trade from travelers heading north to the gold fields. Her father needed her, whether he acknowledged the value of her business acumen or not. The floorboards creaked beneath her feet as she made her way downstairs. The family living quarters above the store were modest but comfortable, a testament to her parents' hard work since arriving in Clifton Hill 5 years earlier. The town had grown considerably in that time, from a dusty outpost to a respectable settlement with a hotel, 2 saloons, and a small church. "There you are," her mother said, looking up from the stove where she was preparing breakfast. Martha Zimmerman's once dark hair was now streaked with gray, her hands roughened from years of work. "You're looking pale again, Rachel." "I'm fine, Mother." Rachel forced a smile, though the effort made her head throb. "Just didn't sleep well." Her mother's brow furrowed with concern. "Perhaps you should see Dr. Harrison again." Rachel shook her head. "He already said there's nothing wrong with me, just recommended more rest and fewer novels." The bitterness in her voice was unmistakable. "The doctor knows best, dear." Her mother placed a plate of eggs and toast before her. "Eat. You need your strength." Rachel stared at the food, her stomach turning at the mere thought of eating. Nevertheless, she forced down a few bites to appease her mother before excusing herself to open the store. The morning air was crisp as she unlocked the front door of Zimmerman's general store, the familiar scents of leather, coffee, and tobacco greeting her. She breathed deeply, trying to steady herself against the wave of dizziness that threatened to overwhelm her. "Miss Zimmerman, are you all right?" The deep voice startled her, and Rachel turned to find Isaac Edwards watching her with concern. He stood tall in the doorway, his broad shoulders blocking the morning light. At 28, Isaac had arrived in Clifton Hill only 2 months ago, taking work as a ranch hand at the Morgan spread outside town. His quiet demeanor and impeccable manners had already made him a favorite among the local ladies, though he seemed oblivious to their attention. "Mr. Edwards." Rachel straightened, willing color into her cheeks. "I'm perfectly fine, thank you, just opening up for the day. What can I help you with?" Isaac studied her face for a moment longer than was comfortable, his blue eyes piercing. "Mr. Morgan sent me for supplies. We're branding calves this week." Rachel nodded and moved behind the counter, grateful for something to focus on besides the handsome cowboy's scrutiny. "I'll prepare the usual order. Anything else?" "No, that'll do." He leaned against the counter, removing his hat to reveal dark hair in need of a trim. "Though I could use some conversation while you work, if you don't mind. Gets lonely out at the ranch sometimes." Despite her discomfort, Rachel found herself smiling. There was something disarming about Isaac's straightforward manner. "I suppose I can spare some conversation, Mr. Edwards. What would you like to talk about? How about why you're swaying on your feet like a newborn colt?" Rachel's hand stilled on the sack of flour she was reaching for. "I beg your pardon. No offense intended, Miss Zimmerman, but you look unwell." His voice lowered. "And you've looked unwell for at least 2 weeks now. You've been watching me, Mr. Edwards." She raised an eyebrow, unsure whether to be flattered or alarmed. A slight flush colored his tanned cheeks. "Not intentionally. I just notice things." Rachel sighed, suddenly too exhausted to maintain pretenses. "It's nothing serious, just a persistent fever and some aches. Dr. Harrison says it's likely just exhaustion." "And do you believe that?" The directness of his question caught her off guard. No one had asked what she thought about her own condition. "No," she admitted quietly, "I don't, but it doesn't seem to matter what I believe." Isaac frowned, his eyes never leaving her face. "It matters." Something in his tone made Rachel's chest tighten. Before she could respond, the bell above the door jingled, announcing another customer. The moment broken, Isaac stepped back, allowing her to attend to Mrs. Peterson and her list of household needs. By noon, the store was busy with the usual Saturday crowd. Rachel moved mechanically through her tasks, ignoring the increasing pain in her joints and the heat that seemed to radiate from her skin. Isaac had remained longer than necessary, helping her reach items from high shelves and carrying heavy purchases to customers' wagons. His presence was both comforting and unsettling. As the last customer departed, Rachel allowed herself to sink onto the stool behind the counter, closing her eyes against the room's sudden spinning. "Miss Zimmerman." Isaac's voice seemed to come from far away. She tried to respond, to assure him she was fine, but the words wouldn't form. Instead, darkness crept in from the edges of her vision, and she felt herself falling. Strong arms caught her before she hit the floor. Through the haze, she was aware of being lifted, of a deep voice calling her name with increasing urgency. "Rachel, can you hear me?" She wanted to answer, to tell Isaac not to worry, but consciousness slipped away like water through her fingers. When Rachel next opened her eyes, she was in her bedroom above the store. The curtains were drawn against the afternoon sun, casting the room in soft shadows. Her mother sat beside the bed, her face lined with worry. "What happened?" Rachel's voice was little more than a whisper. "You fainted, dear." Her mother placed a cool cloth on her forehead. "That nice Mr. Edwards carried you upstairs. Your father's gone for Dr. Harrison." Rachel groaned, both from the persistent ache in her body and the thought of facing the doctor's dismissive attitude again. "It won't do any good. Hush now. The doctor will know what to do." But when Dr. Harrison arrived an hour later, his examination was cursory at best. He listened to her heart, felt her pulse, and asked the same questions he'd asked during previous visits. "As I've said before, Miss Zimmerman, there's nothing physically wrong with you." The elderly physician closed his bag with a decisive snap. "What you're experiencing is simply the result of a nervous disposition. Women of your age are susceptible to such things, especially those who overtax themselves with intellectual pursuits. But the fever can be explained by excitement or anxiety." He turned to her father, who stood in the doorway. "I recommend complete rest, no reading or other stimulating activities, and perhaps a tonic to calm her nerves." "She has a business to help run," David Zimmerman said with a frown. "The store can manage without her for a few days," Dr. Harrison interrupted. "Unless you want a daughter permanently invalided by her own imagination." Rachel clenched her fists beneath the blankets, anger temporarily overriding her discomfort. "I am not imagining this," she said firmly. "Something is wrong, Dr. Harrison. I know my own body." The doctor's expression hardened. "This is precisely the sort of overwrought emotion I'm referring to, Mr. Zimmerman. Keep her calm, keep her quiet, and these episodes will pass." After he left, Rachel's father lingered in the doorway, his expression troubled. "You heard the doctor, Rachel. Rest and avoid excitement." "Father, please." She pushed herself up against the pillows, wincing at the effort. "I'm not hysterical. I'm ill with something Dr. Harrison doesn't understand or doesn't want to acknowledge." David Zimmerman sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "Rachel, you've always had a fanciful imagination. Even as a child, you insisted on seeing things differently from everyone else. But at some point, you must accept the judgment of those who know better." "Know better." Rachel's voice rose despite her weakness. "Doctor Harrison spent less than 5 minutes examining me. He didn't even take my temperature." "Enough." Her father's voice was sharp. "I won't have this argument again. You will rest as the doctor ordered, and that's final." He left before she could respond, closing the door firmly behind him. Rachel fell back against the pillows, tears of frustration burning in her eyes. No one was listening. No one believed that what she was experiencing was real. The next 3 days passed in a blur of fever, pain, and fitful sleep. Rachel's mother brought broth and tea, speaking in hushed tones as though normal conversation might shatter her daughter's fragile constitution. Her father checked in briefly, his expression a mixture of concern and impatience. Friends from town sent flowers and notes wishing her a speedy recovery from her nervous spell. By the 4th day, Rachel's fever had subsided enough for her to sit up in bed and even read a little, though she kept her book hidden beneath the blankets when her mother came in. The pain in her joints had receded to a dull ache, and she dared to hope that whatever mysterious illness had gripped her was finally releasing its hold. That afternoon, a soft knock at her bedroom door roused her from a half-doze. Expecting her mother, she called, "Come in." Instead, Isaac Edwards stood in the doorway, his tall frame seeming to fill the small space. His hat was in his hands, and his expression was one of genuine concern. "Mr. Edwards." Rachel hastily smoothed her hair, acutely aware of her disheveled appearance. "What are you doing here?" "I came to see how you were faring." He remained in the doorway, respecting propriety despite the unusual circumstances. "Your mother said you were feeling better today. Did she send you up?" Rachel couldn't imagine her proper mother allowing a man who wasn't family into her bedroom, improved condition or not. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Not exactly. I might have mentioned that I had a message from Mrs. Peterson about a special order and then found my way upstairs on my own." "Mr. Edwards, I'm shocked." Rachel couldn't help returning his smile. "I never took you for a man who would bend the truth. Only when necessary." His expression grew serious. "I've been worried about you, Miss Zimmerman, the way you collapsed. Dr. Harrison says it's just nerves." She couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. "Apparently I'm too emotional and read too much." Isaac's brow furrowed. "And what do you say it is?" Again, that simple question asking her opinion about her own condition caught her off guard. "I don't know," she admitted. "But it's not nerves. I've had fevers that come and go, pains in my joints that make it hard to walk sometimes, and fatigue like I've never experienced." "How long?" "Almost a month now, though it's gotten worse recently." Isaac leaned against the doorframe, his blue eyes thoughtful. "My younger sister had something similar when she was about your age. Doctors in Denver couldn't figure it out either. Said it was everything from hysteria to lovesickness." "What happened to her?" Rachel asked, drawn in by this unexpected connection. A shadow crossed his face. "She got worse. Much worse. Until finally a doctor passing through town recognized the symptoms, called it rheumatic fever." Said it happened sometimes after a throat infection, which she'd had about 6 weeks before the fever started. Rachel's heart quickened. I had a terrible sore throat in April. Dr. Miller treated me for it. He was still here then, before he moved to Helena. That fits. Isaac nodded. My sister recovered eventually with proper treatment. But it took time, and it could have been much worse if that doctor hadn't recognized what was happening. What was the treatment? Rachel leaned forward eagerly. Salicylates for the fever and pain, complete rest for several weeks, and careful monitoring of her heart. He hesitated. The doctor said it can affect the heart if not treated properly. A chill ran through Rachel despite the warmth of the room. Dr. Harrison won't listen to me. He's convinced I'm just a hysterical woman. Then we'll make him listen. The determination in Isaac's voice was unmistakable, or we'll find someone who will. The word hung in the air between them. Isaac met her gaze steadily. If you'll allow me to help. Before Rachel could respond, footsteps sounded in the hallway. Isaac straightened quickly, taking a step back from the door just as Martha Zimmerman appeared. Mr. Edwards, what are you doing up here? Her mother's voice was sharp with disapproval. Isaac tipped his hat politely. Forgive me, Mrs. Zimmerman. I was just leaving a message from Mrs. Peterson about her fabric order. Miss Zimmerman is the only one who knows which pattern she requested. Martha's eyes narrowed in suspicion, but her ingrained politeness won out. Very well. But in the future, such messages can be relayed through me or Mr. Zimmerman. Of course, madam. Isaac nodded respectfully. I hope you'll be well soon, Miss Zimmerman. As he turned to leave, his eyes met Rachel's once more. In that brief glance was a promise. He would be back, and he would help her find answers. True to his unspoken word, Isaac returned the next day. This time, he came through proper channels, bringing a small bouquet of wildflowers and asking permission to visit the invalid. Rachel's mother, though still wary, allowed the visit, though she insisted the bedroom door remain open and that Rachel receive him in her sitting chair rather than in bed. You look better today, Isaac observed as he took the chair opposite hers. Rachel smiled wryly. The fever comes and goes. This morning is a good one. I've been thinking about your condition. Isaac leaned forward, keeping his voice low enough that Martha, who was ostensibly arranging linens in the hallway, couldn't hear. I spoke with Mr. Morgan's wife. She was a nurse during the war, you know. Rachel hadn't known. Elizabeth Morgan, wife of the wealthiest rancher in the county, was known for her charitable work but rarely spoke about her past. What did she say? She agrees it could be rheumatic fever, based on what I described. She also said there's a doctor in Fort Benton who specializes in unusual cases. Dr. Thomas Livingston. He studied in Europe and has a good reputation. Rachel felt a flicker of hope, quickly extinguished by reality. Fort Benton is more than 100 miles away. My father would never agree to such a journey, especially not for what he considers an imaginary illness. What if the doctor came to you? Isaac's eyes held a determined glint. Mrs. Morgan said he sometimes travels to smaller settlements when called. Called by whom? Doctor. Harrison certainly won't request a second opinion. Leave that to me. Isaac reached across the small space between them, briefly touching her hand. I believe you, Rachel. You're ill and you deserve proper treatment. The simple declaration, I believe you, brought tears to Rachel's eyes. Those 3 words, spoken with such conviction, felt like a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman. Why? She whispered. Why do you care so much? Isaac withdrew his hand, but his gaze remained steady. Because I watched my sister suffer when no one would listen to her. Because I've seen the same pain and frustration in your eyes, and because— He hesitated, a flush creeping up his neck. Because I think you're the kind of person worth fighting for. The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken feelings. Rachel found herself unable to look away from his face, from the sincerity written there. "Mr. Edwards." Martha Zimmerman's voice broke the moment. "I believe you've stayed long enough. Rachel needs her rest." Isaac stood immediately, bowing slightly to both women. "Of course. Thank you for allowing me to visit, Mrs. Zimmerman. Miss Rachel, I hope you continue to improve." As he left, Rachel caught the meaningful look he gave her. He had a plan, and for the first time in weeks, she felt a glimmer of real hope. The next few days brought a resurgence of Rachel's symptoms. The fever returned with a vengeance, accompanied by a rash across her chest and arms that even Dr. Harrison couldn't dismiss as imagination. He prescribed a poultice of mustard and camphor, which did little except make Rachel's skin burn and her eyes water. Through it all, Isaac visited daily, sometimes just for a few minutes when her parents were occupied in the store. He brought news from town, read to her when her eyes were too tired to focus, and most importantly, he listened when she described her symptoms, never doubting or dismissing her experiences. On the 7th day after her collapse, Rachel woke to raised voices from downstairs. She recognized her father's authoritative tone, Dr. Harrison's clipped speech, and surprisingly Isaac's deeper cadence. Curious and concerned, she forced herself out of bed, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders against the morning chill. The stairs creaked beneath her feet as she made her way down, pausing at the bottom to catch her breath. The voices came from the store, where her father appeared to be engaged in a heated discussion with both men. "This is completely inappropriate," Dr. Harrison was saying. "I am the physician in this town, and I've already diagnosed Miss Zimmerman's condition." "With all due respect, doctor," Isaac replied, his tone measured but firm. "A second opinion can't hurt. Dr. Livingston is well respected, and he's already in the area, visiting patients in Marysville." "My daughter doesn't need another doctor," David Zimmerman insisted. "Dr. Harrison has been treating our family for years." And yet Rachel continues to worsen. Isaac's voice had an edge now. "Sir, I mean no disrespect, but your daughter is genuinely ill. This isn't hysteria or nerves or an overactive imagination. The symptoms match those of rheumatic fever, which can damage the heart if left untreated." "Rheumatic fever," Dr. Harrison scoffed. "That's quite a specific diagnosis from a ranch hand." "My sister had it," Isaac said quietly. "I watched her suffer for months before getting proper treatment. I recognized the signs." Rachel stepped into the store, unable to remain hidden any longer. "I want to see Dr. Livingston." 3 heads turned toward her. Her father's expression was a mixture of surprise and disapproval. "Doctor?" Harrison looked affronted, and Isaac's face showed relief and concern in equal measure. "Rachel, you should be in bed," her father began, but she cut him off with a raised hand. "I've been in bed for a week, following Dr. Harrison's advice, and I'm getting worse, not better." She moved further into the room, grateful for the counter she could lean against. "If Dr. Livingston is willing to examine me, I want to see him." "This is highly irregular," Dr. Harrison sputtered. "Young Mr. Edwards has no authority to summon another physician." "I didn't summon him," Isaac corrected. "Mrs. Morgan did as a personal favor. She was concerned about Miss Zimmerman's condition based on what she'd heard." "Elizabeth Morgan should mind her own business," Dr. Harrison muttered. "Rachel is my business." David Zimmerman's voice was firm. "And I say she doesn't need another doctor poking and prodding at her." "Father." Rachel straightened, summoning strength she didn't know she possessed. "I am 22 years old. I have helped you run this store for 5 years. I've never asked for special treatment or consideration. But I am asking now. Let me see Dr. Livingston." Her father stared at her, clearly taken aback by her uncharacteristic defiance. In the silence that followed, Martha appeared from the back room, wiping her hands on her apron. "What's all this commotion? Rachel, you should be resting." Quickly, Isaac explained the situation, his eyes never leaving Rachel's face as he spoke. Martha listened attentively, her expression growing increasingly troubled. "David," she said finally, turning to her husband, "what harm could it do to have another doctor look at her? If he agrees with Dr. Harrison, then we'll know for certain, and if not—" She left the sentence unfinished, the implication clear. David Zimmerman looked from his wife to his daughter, his resistance visibly weakening. "When would this Dr. Livingston be available?" "Tomorrow morning," Isaac answered promptly. "He's staying at the hotel in Marysville tonight and could come first thing." Dr. Harrison made a sound of disgust. "I wash my hands of this. When Miss Zimmerman's condition proves to be exactly what I diagnosed, perhaps you'll regret this breach of trust." With that, he gathered his hat and bag and stalked out of the store. Rachel sagged against the counter, the brief burst of energy that had carried her through the confrontation rapidly fading. Isaac was at her side instantly. "You should be resting," he said softly, echoing her mother's words but with a gentleness that made them sound entirely different. "I'm tired of resting," she replied, though she allowed him to support her elbow. "Tired of being treated like a fragile doll or a troublesome child." "I know." His voice was low, meant only for her ears. "But save your strength for tomorrow. Dr. Livingston will need to see you at your most coherent." Rachel nodded, acknowledging the wisdom in his words. With Isaac's steadying hand on her arm and her mother hovering anxiously nearby, she made her way back upstairs to her bedroom. As she settled back against her pillows, Rachel found herself wondering about this cowboy who had so unexpectedly championed her cause. Isaac Edwards was something of a mystery in Clifton Hill. He'd arrived from Colorado with excellent references but few personal details. He worked hard, spoke little, and kept to himself except for his now daily visits to check on her. And yet, he'd gone to extraordinary lengths on her behalf, convincing Elizabeth Morgan to use her influence to bring in another doctor, standing up to both Dr. Harrison and her father, all for a young woman he'd known for mere months. The question that had been forming in her mind for days surfaced again. Why? What was it about her that inspired such loyalty from him? And more troublingly, why did the thought of him make her heart race in a way that had nothing to do with her illness? Dr. Thomas Livingston arrived at precisely 9 o'clock the next morning. Unlike Dr. Harrison, who was well past 60 with wispy white hair and stooped shoulders, Dr. Livingston was a man in his prime, perhaps 40, with a neatly trimmed beard and intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. Isaac had come ahead of him, explaining that he'd ridden to Marysville at dawn to escort the doctor to Clifton Hill. Rachel noted with interest how her father, initially so resistant to the idea, treated the visiting physician with cautious respect. "Miss Zimmerman, Dr. Livingston said as he entered her room, medical bag in hand. "I understand you've been experiencing some troubling symptoms." "Yes, doctor." Rachel sat up straighter in bed, determined to present her case clearly. "It began about a month ago with fevers that come and go, joint pain, fatigue, and more recently, this rash." She pulled aside the collar of her nightgown to show the red, slightly raised patches on her chest. Dr. Livingston nodded, his expression revealing nothing. "I'd like to examine you thoroughly if you don't mind. Mrs. Zimmerman, if you could stay as a chaperone." Martha nodded, positioning herself by the window while the doctor began his examination. Unlike Dr. Harrison's cursory approach, Dr. Livingston was methodical. He listened to her heart and lungs with his stethoscope, checked her pulse in multiple locations, examined her joints, and asked detailed questions about the progression of her symptoms. "You mentioned having a sore throat in April," he said, gently palpating the glands in her neck. "Was it severe?" "Yes, quite. Dr. Miller treated me for it before he left town, and the fever began approximately 2 weeks after the throat infection resolved," Rachel thought back. "Yes, that's right. I didn't connect the two until Mr. Edwards mentioned his sister had a similar experience, Dr." Livingston's eyebrows rose slightly. "Mr. Edwards suggested rheumatic fever, I understand." "He did. His sister suffered from it." The doctor hummed thoughtfully, continuing his examination in silence for several minutes. Finally, he straightened and addressed both Rachel and her mother. "Based on the symptoms described in my examination, I believe Miss Zimmerman is indeed suffering from rheumatic fever." He held up a hand as Martha gasped. "It's a serious condition, but treatable if managed properly. The illness occurs when the body's immune response to certain infections, particularly streptococcal throat infections, becomes overzealous and begins to attack the body's own tissues." "But Dr. Harrison said," Martha began. "Dr. Harrison is an experienced physician, Dr." Livingston interrupted diplomatically, "But rheumatic fever can be difficult to diagnose, particularly in its early stages. The pattern of symptoms, the migratory joint pain, the characteristic rash, the fluctuating fever all point to this condition." "What about my heart?" Rachel asked quietly, remembering Isaac's warning. Dr. Livingston's expression grew more serious. "I detect a slight murmur, which could indicate that the inflammation has affected your heart valves. It's not unusual in rheumatic fever, but it is the most concerning aspect of the illness." Martha's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh, Rachel, is it permanent?" Rachel forced herself to ask the question calmly, though her pulse had quickened at the doctor's words. "Not necessarily. With proper treatment and complete rest, many patients recover fully. But it's essential that we begin treatment immediately and monitor your heart carefully." He turned to Martha. "Mrs. Zimmerman, I'll prepare a treatment plan and discuss it with you and your husband. For now, Miss Zimmerman must have absolute bed rest, no exertion of any kind." After providing detailed instructions to Martha about medication and care, Dr. Livingston took his leave, promising to return in 3 days to check on Rachel's progress. As soon as he had gone downstairs, Rachel slumped back against her pillows, relief and fear washing over her in equal measure. She had been right, her illness was real, diagnosable, potentially serious. But now, at least, she had a path forward. Martha smoothed Rachel's hair back from her forehead, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Oh, my dear girl, I'm so sorry we didn't listen sooner." "It's all right, Mother." Rachel caught her hand and squeezed it. No one knew what to look for, except Mr. Edwards. Martha's expression was thoughtful. "He seems very invested in your well-being, Rachel." Rachel felt color rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with her fever. "He's been kind." "Very kind," her mother agreed, "and very persistent. He reminds me of your father when he was younger, determined once he sets his mind to something." She patted Rachel's hand. "Rest now. I'll bring your medicine when Dr. Livingston has explained everything to your father." Alone in her room, Rachel found her thoughts turning once again to Isaac. He had been right about her illness, about the need for a different doctor, about everything. Without his intervention, she might have continued to deteriorate while Dr. Harrison dismissed her symptoms as hysteria. She owed him her life, perhaps. But even more than that, she owed him for believing in her when no one else would. The treatment doctor Livingston prescribed was rigorous. Large doses of sodium salicylate for the inflammation and fever, complete bed rest for at least 3 weeks, and careful monitoring of her heart. The medicine tasted vile and sometimes made her stomach rebel, but Rachel took it faithfully, determined to recover. Isaac visited daily, always properly chaperoned by her mother or, occasionally, her father. He brought books from the small town library, news from the ranch, and most importantly, unwavering support. As the days passed, Rachel found herself looking forward to his visits with an eagerness that went beyond mere gratitude. "You're looking better," he remarked on his 10th consecutive visit, settling into the chair beside her bed. Martha sat by the window, ostensibly mending but clearly keeping an ear on their conversation. "I feel better," Rachel admitted. "The fever hasn't returned in 3 days and the joint pain is almost gone. Dr. Livingston says you're responding well to the treatment." Isaac's smile was warm. "He told me yesterday when I ran into him at the hotel." "You've been talking to my doctor?" Rachel raised an eyebrow, amused rather than offended. Isaac shrugged. "I like to stay informed. Mr. Edwards has been quite the advocate for you," Martha commented from her position by the window. "Half the town is talking about how he stood up to Dr. Harrison." "Only half." Isaac's eyes twinkled with humor. "I must be losing my touch." Rachel laughed, the sound lighter and more carefree than it had been in weeks. "My knight in dusty leather," she teased, then blushed at the implication of her words. Isaac's expression softened, and something in his gaze made Rachel's heart skip a beat. "I'd wear dustier leather for a worthier cause," he said quietly. Martha cleared her throat pointedly. "Mr. Edwards, perhaps you could read to Rachel for a while." Her eyes tire easily still. The moment broken, Isaac reached for the book. He'd brought a collection of poetry by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. As he read in his deep, melodious voice, Rachel found herself captivated not by the words on the page, but by the man reading them. It was during the 3rd week of her convalescence that Rachel finally asked the question that had been on her mind since Isaac had first come to her aid. "Why did you believe me?" They were alone for once, Martha having stepped out to prepare tea. "From the beginning, when everyone else thought I was imagining things or seeking attention, you believed me." "Why?" Isaac set aside the newspaper he'd been reading to her. For a long moment, he was silent, his expression thoughtful. "I told you about my sister," he began finally. "What I didn't tell you was that she nearly died because no one would listen to her. By the time that traveling doctor diagnosed her, the rheumatic fever had damaged her heart severely." He looked down at his hands. "She's still alive, but she'll never be strong, never have the life she should have had." "I'm so sorry," Rachel said softly. "It wasn't just that, though." He raised his eyes to meet hers. "From the first day I walked into your store, I saw something in you, a strength, an intelligence that impressed me. When you started looking ill, I noticed because I'd been watching you already. Admiring you." Rachel's breath caught in her throat. "Admiring me." Isaac nodded, a faint flush coloring his cheeks. "You're not like any other woman I've met, Rachel Zimmerman. You run that store as well as any man could, you read books that most women wouldn't touch, and you face every challenge with courage. When you insisted something was wrong with your health, I believed you because I've seen your judgment in other matters. Why would this be any different?" His words washed over her like a warm breeze, healing something inside her that had been wounded by the dismissal and disbelief she'd faced. "Thank you," she whispered, "not just for believing me, but for seeing me the real me." "I see you," he confirmed, his voice low and earnest, "and what I see is—" He hesitated, then seemed to gather his resolve. "What I see is a woman I could love if given the chance." The boldness of his declaration left Rachel momentarily speechless. Before she could respond, Martha returned with the tea tray, effectively ending their private conversation. But Isaac's words lingered in Rachel's mind long after he'd gone. "A woman I could love." The possibility both thrilled and terrified her. Her illness had shown her how fragile life could be, how quickly circumstances could change. Did she dare to hope for a future with this man who had come to mean so much to her in such a short time? By the fourth-week, Dr. Livingston declared Rachel well enough to leave her bed for short periods, though still confined to the house. Her first venture was to the small sitting room adjacent to her bedroom, where she sat by the window, watching the daily activities of Clifton Hill with newfound appreciation for the simple pleasure of observing life unfold. Isaac's visits continued, though they were necessarily more formal now that Rachel was receiving him in the sitting room rather than as an invalid. He brought her a bouquet of late summer wildflowers, carefully arranged and tied with a blue ribbon that matched her eyes. "These are beautiful," she said, breathing in their subtle fragrance. "Where did you find them?" "There's a meadow near the eastern ridge of the Morgan property," he explained. "It's my favorite spot, peaceful with a view all the way to the mountains." "It sounds wonderful." Rachel sighed, longing for open spaces after weeks confined indoors. "I can't wait until Dr. Livingston clears me for outdoor activities." "He says another 2 weeks," Isaac reminded her. "Your heart needs time to heal completely." Rachel nodded, accepting the necessity but still chafing at the restrictions. "Will you tell me more about this meadow? I'd like to picture it." Isaac settled into the chair opposite hers, close enough that their knees almost touched. "It's high enough to catch the breeze even on the hottest days. The grass there is different, softer, more silvery than the valley grass. In late afternoon, when the sun hits it just right, it looks like a sea of gold." As he described the wildflowers, the birds that nested in the nearby trees, and the way the clouds cast moving shadows across the landscape, Rachel closed her eyes, imagining herself there with him. It was a tantalizing vision of freedom and companionship. "I'd like to see it someday," she said when he finished. "I'd like to show it to you." His eyes held that same intense look she'd noticed before, as if he were seeing beyond her present condition to possibilities that lay ahead. "When you're well." "When I'm well," she agreed. The phrase became something of a promise between them in the days that followed. When Isaac spoke of a new colt born at the ranch, Rachel would say, "I'd like to see it when I'm well." When he mentioned the autumn dance planned for October, his response was, "I'd like to take you when you're well." Each exchange added another thread to the tapestry of future moments they were weaving together, tentative, hopeful, increasingly bold. On a crisp September morning, 6 weeks after her collapse in the store, Dr. Livingston performed his most thorough examination yet. He listened to Rachel's heart from multiple angles, had her walk across the room and back while he observed her breathing, and asked detailed questions about any residual symptoms. "Well, Miss Zimmerman," he said finally, setting aside his stethoscope, "I'm pleased to say you've made a remarkable recovery. The heart murmur has resolved and your other symptoms have cleared completely." Rachel's mother, seated nearby, clasped her hands in relief. "So she's cured." "I wouldn't use the word cured just yet," Dr. Livingston cautioned. "Rheumatic fever can recur, and there's still a need for caution. Miss Zimmerman should avoid overexertion for another month and continue taking a smaller dose of the salicylate as a precaution." "But I can resume normal activities," Rachel pressed, hardly daring to hope. Dr. Livingston smiled kindly. "Gradually, yes. Start with short walks, perhaps helping in the store for an hour or 2 each day. Listen to your body. If you feel tired, rest. But I see no reason why you can't begin to reclaim your life." The news was better than Rachel had dared to hope for. After the doctor left, she stood by her bedroom window, watching the activity in the street below with new eyes. Her ordeal had changed her, she realized. She had always been independent-minded, but now she felt a deeper strength, the kind that comes from fighting a battle and emerging victorious. And she hadn't fought alone. Isaac's unwavering support had been her anchor through the darkest days. The thought of him made her heart quicken in a way that had nothing to do with her illness. As if summoned by her thoughts, she spotted him crossing the street toward the store, his tall figure unmistakable even from a distance. Without thinking, Rachel hurried downstairs, ignoring her mother's startled exclamation. "Rachel, you shouldn't be rushing about. Dr. Livingston said I could resume normal activities," she called back, already halfway down the stairs. Gradually, she reached the store just as Isaac entered, the bell above the door announcing his arrival. He stopped short when he saw her, surprise and pleasure lighting his features. "Rachel, you're downstairs. Dr. Livingston gave me permission to start moving about more." She couldn't contain her smile. "I'm on the mend, Isaac, really and truly." It was the first time she had used his given name, and the significance wasn't lost on either of them. His smile broadened, his eyes crinkling at the corners in a way that made her heart flutter. "That's wonderful news." David Zimmerman emerged from the storeroom, raising an eyebrow at the sight of his daughter. "Rachel, did Dr. Livingston approve this excursion?" "He did, Father." Rachel straightened her shoulders. "He says I can gradually resume normal activities, including helping in the store for short periods." Her father's expression softened. "Well, that is good news, but don't overdo it, mind." "I won't." Rachel turned back to Isaac, lowering her voice. "Could we talk, privately?" Isaac glanced at her father, who gave a reluctant nod. "The back porch, no longer than 10 minutes, David stipulated. "Your mother will have my hide if I let you exhaust yourself on your first day up." The back porch of the Zimmerman store overlooked a small garden where Martha grew herbs and flowers. It was Rachel's favorite spot, secluded yet open to the sky, with a comfortable bench where she often sat to read during quiet moments. "I've missed this," she said as they settled on the bench, the September sun warming their faces. Fresh air, the scent of the garden, the feeling of being part of the world again. "The world has missed you in it," Isaac replied, his voice gentle. "I've missed you in it, though I've seen you nearly every day." Rachel understood what he meant. Their interactions, while frequent, had been constrained by her illness and the constant presence of chaperones. This was the first time they had truly been alone since the day he had declared his feelings. "Isaac." She turned to face him fully. "I never got to respond to what you said that day about seeing a woman you could love." His expression grew serious, a vulnerability in his eyes that tugged at her heart. "You don't need to respond, Rachel. It was forward of me to speak so plainly when you were still recovering." "No, it wasn't." She reached for his hand, a bold move that surprised even herself. "Your honesty has been the one constant through all of this, and I need to be honest too." Isaac's fingers curled around hers, warm and strong. "I'm listening." Rachel took a deep breath, finding courage in the steady pressure of his hand. "When I was at my sickest, when the fever was highest and the pain most intense, I had moments of perfect clarity about what mattered most to me. And in those moments, your face was what I saw. Your voice was what I heard." She met his gaze steadily. I think that means something, don't you?" The hope that bloomed in his eyes was answer enough, but his words, when they came, made her heart soar. "It means everything, Rachel, everything." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared feelings settling around them like a comfortable blanket. Finally, Isaac spoke again, his voice husky with emotion. "I know this is sudden. We've known each other only a few months. But those months have shown me your strength, your intelligence, your courage. I've seen you at your most vulnerable and your most determined. I've watched you fight for your life with a dignity that humbled me." He turned to face her fully. I don't need more time to know what I feel for you is real and lasting." "Nor I," Rachel whispered, the truth of it resonating through her entire being. "What I feel for you was born in crisis but has grown in calm. It's not gratitude or dependency, it's deeper than that." "Rachel." Isaac's free hand came up to cup her cheek, his touch feather light. "May I call on you properly, court you as you deserve to be courted?" She leaned into his touch, smiling through the tears that had gathered unexpectedly in her eyes. "Yes, yes, I would like that very much." The sound of the back door opening reluctantly separated them. Martha Zimmerman stood in the doorway, her expression a mixture of concern and knowing awareness. "10 minutes are up," she said gently. "Rachel needs to rest now." Isaac stood immediately, helping Rachel to her feet with careful hands. "Of course, Mrs. Zimmerman. I wouldn't want to tire her." As they walked back inside, Rachel kept her hand in his, a silent declaration to her mother of what had transpired. Martha's raised eyebrow indicated that a conversation would follow, but her slight smile suggested it might not be as difficult as Rachel had feared. The courtship of Rachel Zimmerman and Isaac Edwards became the talk of Clifton Hill over the following weeks. Isaac called on her every Sunday afternoon, took her for short walks when the weather permitted, and escorted her to church once she was strong enough to attend. Rachel's parents, initially cautious about their daughter's involvement with a man they knew relatively little about, gradually warmed to Isaac as they observed his gentle care and obvious devotion. "He's a good man," David Zimmerman admitted to his wife one evening after Isaac had stayed for supper. "Hardworking, respectful, and he clearly adores Rachel." "And she him," Martha replied, her expression thoughtful. "I've never seen her so animated, so full of life even before she fell ill." By October, Rachel was well enough to help in the store for several hours each day and to accept Isaac's invitation to the autumn dance. It would be their first truly public appearance as a couple, and Rachel spent days preparing, altering one of her better dresses to reflect the latest fashion she'd seen in a catalog. The night of the dance, Isaac arrived at the Zimmerman home looking more handsome than Rachel had ever seen him. He had traded his usual work clothes for a well-cut suit, his hair neatly trimmed, his face freshly shaved. "You look beautiful," he said as she descended the stairs, his eyes taking in her blue dress with its delicate lace collar. "As do you," she replied, enjoying the blush that crept up his neck at her bold compliment. The town hall had been transformed for the occasion, with autumn leaves and berries decorating the walls and tables laden with food prepared by the women of Clifton Hill. As Isaac led Rachel inside, she was struck by how different everything seemed from her last public appearance months ago. Then, she had been struggling to hide her illness, to function normally while her body betrayed her. Now, she entered with her head high, her hand resting comfortably on the arm of the man who had believed in her when no one else would. "Miss Zimmerman, how wonderful to see you looking so well." Elizabeth Morgan approached them, elegant in a burgundy dress that spoke of Eastern refinement. "And Mr. Edwards, how gallant you look tonight." "Mrs. Morgan." Isaac bowed slightly. "I believe I owe you my thanks once again for your help with Dr. Livingston." The older woman waved away his gratitude. "I merely made an introduction. You were the one who recognized what was happening." She turned to Rachel. "This young man fought quite fiercely on your behalf, my dear. I've rarely seen such determination." Rachel squeezed Isaac's arm. "I know, I owe him everything." "Not everything," Isaac corrected gently. "You fought the hardest battle yourself." Elizabeth's eyes moved between them, a knowing smile playing at her lips. "Well, I'll leave you young people to enjoy the dance. I believe the music is about to begin." As the small orchestra, 3 local men with fiddles and a piano struck up a lively tune, Isaac turned to Rachel with a questioning look. Dr. Livingston said moderate exercise would be good for you. Would a dance be too much? One dance would be perfect, Rachel decided, allowing him to lead her to the center of the floor. Isaac proved to be an excellent dancer, guiding her through the steps with confident ease. Rachel, who had always enjoyed dancing before her illness, found a new appreciation for the simple pleasure of movement, of music, of being held in the arms of someone who cared for her. "Where did you learn to dance so well?" she asked as they circled the floor. "My mother insisted all her children learn proper social graces." A shadow crossed his face. She believed education and refinement were the keys to a better life than she and my father had. "Your mother sounds like a wise woman." She was. The past tense hung between them, prompting Rachel to squeeze his hand in silent sympathy. "She passed 3 years ago. My father followed 6 months later. I'm sorry." Rachel had suspected Isaac had known loss, had sensed it in the way he spoke of family, but he had never shared these details before. They were good people. Isaac's smile returned. "They would have liked you very much, Rachel. My mother especially would have appreciated your spirit." The music shifted to a slower waltz, and Isaac drew her closer, still mindful of propriety but allowing himself to enjoy their proximity. "I've thought about what they would say if they could see me now," he continued, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "I think they would tell me I've found something precious and that I should hold on to it with both hands." Rachel's heart quickened at the intensity in his eyes. "And have you found something precious?" "I have." The simplicity of his response carried more weight than any elaborate declaration could have. As the evening progressed, Rachel danced twice more with Isaac and once with her father, who had surprised everyone by attending the social event. Between dances, she sat with Isaac at a small table near the edge of the hall, watching the other couples and enjoying the comfortable conversation that flowed between them. "The Morgan Ranch is hosting a harvest celebration next weekend," Isaac mentioned as they shared a slice of apple pie. "Mr. Morgan has invited all his employees and their friends." He hesitated over the word as if uncertain it adequately described their relationship. "Would you like to attend with me? Your parents would be welcome too, of course." "I'd love to," Rachel replied without hesitation. "Though I think my parents may decline. Father rarely closes the store on Saturdays." "Then perhaps." Isaac seemed to be gathering his courage for something. "Perhaps Mrs. Morgan might serve as a chaperone. The ranch is some distance, and we would need to leave early in the morning." The thought of spending hours in Isaac's company, away from the watchful eyes of Clifton Hill, sent a thrill of excitement through Rachel. "I'll ask my parents tonight," she promised. To Rachel's surprise and delight, her parents agreed to the plan, though not without stipulations. She was to ride in the Morgans' carriage rather than on horseback, to avoid overexertion, and she was to return before dark, no matter how enjoyable the festivities. "Your health is still fragile," her father reminded her. "One setback could undo months of progress." "I understand, Father." Rachel accepted the conditions gratefully, knowing they came from a place of love rather than restriction. "I'll be careful." The day of the harvest celebration dawned clear and crisp, the Montana sky a brilliant blue against the gold and crimson of autumn-touched trees. Isaac arrived at the Zimmerman home at 7, driving a handsome buggy borrowed from the ranch. "Mr. Morgan insisted," he explained as he helped Rachel into the seat. "Said it was more comfortable for a lady than the wagon most of the hands will be taking." The journey to the Morgan Ranch took just over an hour, the road winding through valleys and over gentle hills carpeted in the muted colors of fall. Rachel drank in the scenery, realizing how much she had missed the world beyond Clifton Hill during her convalescence. "Is that the meadow you told me about?" she asked as they crested a rise, pointing to a high pasture where the grass seemed to shimmer in the morning light. Isaac nodded, his expression softening. "That's it. It's even more beautiful in person. Could we stop there on the way back?" Just for a few minutes. The request was bold, perhaps even improper, but Rachel found herself suddenly desperate to share this special place with him, to create a memory that belonged solely to them. Isaac studied her face, his eyes searching. "If we have time before dark," he agreed finally. "And if you're not too tired from the celebration." The Morgan Ranch was impressive, a sprawling main house surrounded by barns, corrals, and bunkhouses for the numerous ranch hands. Today, the central yard had been transformed into a festive space, with tables for food, areas for games, and a cleared section for dancing to the music provided by the same musicians who had played at the town dance. Elizabeth Morgan greeted them warmly, insisting on showing Rachel the garden she had cultivated behind the main house, while Isaac was called away to help with some last-minute preparations. "He's a fine young man," Elizabeth commented as they strolled among late-blooming roses. "Mr. Morgan thinks very highly of him." "As do I," Rachel admitted. "More than highly, I suspect." The older woman's eyes were kind but perceptive. "I recognize the look you two share. It's the same way Mr. Morgan and I looked at each other when we were courting all those years ago." Rachel blushed but didn't deny it. "Isaac has been extraordinary. I've never known anyone like him." "Love often comes when we least expect it," Elizabeth said softly, "sometimes in the midst of hardship or pain." She touched a rose that was just beginning to open. "Like these late bloomers that risk the frost for a chance to flower. Sometimes the most beautiful things grow in challenging conditions." The conversation stayed with Rachel throughout the day as she and Isaac participated in the harvest games, enjoyed the generous meal served at midday, and joined in the dancing that followed. Everywhere she looked, she saw evidence of the community. Isaac had become part of the easy camaraderie he shared with the other ranch hands, the respect shown to him by Mr. Morgan, the friendly greetings from the families of other workers. By mid-afternoon, Rachel was beginning to tire, though she was loath to admit it. Isaac, ever attentive, noticed her flagging energy immediately. "We should start back soon," he suggested, leading her to a quiet spot beneath a large oak tree. "I don't want to overtax your strength." "I'm fine," she protested, though she sank gratefully onto the bench he indicated. "Just need a short rest, Rachel." His tone was gentle but firm. "Remember what Dr. Livingston said about listening to your body." She sighed, acknowledging the wisdom of his concern. "You're right. But I've had such a wonderful day, I hate for it to end." "We can still visit the meadow on our way back," he reminded her, "if you're up to it." The thought brightened her mood immediately. "I am definitely up to that." After saying their goodbyes to the Morgans and thanking them for their hospitality, Isaac helped Rachel into the buggy once more. Instead of taking the main road back to town, however, he guided the horses up a narrower track that wound toward the eastern ridge. "Is this the way to your meadow?" Rachel asked, noting how the vegetation changed as they climbed higher, the cottonwoods and willows of the valley giving way to pines and aspens. "It is." Isaac handled the reins with easy confidence, occasionally glancing at her to ensure she was comfortable. "It's a bit out of our way, but worth the detour, I promise." The track eventually opened onto the meadow Isaac had described so vividly weeks earlier. It was everything he had said, and more, a natural clearing high on the ridge, carpeted in silvery grass that caught the late afternoon sun like burnished metal. Wildflowers, though past their summer prime, still dotted the expanse with splashes of purple and gold, and the view beyond stretched all the way to the distant mountains, their peaks already dusted with early snow. "Oh, Isaac," Rachel's voice was hushed with wonder. "It's magical." He helped her down from the buggy, keeping her hand in his as they walked a short distance into the meadow. The breeze was cool but not uncomfortable, carrying the scent of pine and the faint sweetness of autumn. "I've come here often since arriving at the Morgan Ranch," Isaac said, his eyes on the distant horizon. "When I need to think or just be, there's a peace here I haven't found anywhere else." He turned to her, his expression open and vulnerable. "Until I met you." Rachel's heart swelled at his words. In this perfect setting, with this extraordinary man beside her, she felt more alive, more herself than she had ever been. "Isaac." She tightened her grip on his hand. "I need to tell you something." He turned to face her fully, concern flickering across his features. "What is it?" "When I was ill, when everything seemed darkest, you were the light that guided me back. Not just because you helped find Dr. Livingston or stood up to my father or believed me when no one else would." She took a deep breath, gathering courage. "But because you saw me, the real me, not the dutiful daughter or the capable shopkeeper or the invalid. You saw Rachel." Isaac's expression softened, his free hand coming up to cup her cheek. "I see you now," he whispered. "And what I see is the woman I love." The declaration, though anticipated, still took Rachel's breath away. "And I love you," she replied, the words feeling both momentous and entirely natural. "I think I have since you first said I believe you." Isaac's smile was radiant. "May I kiss you, Rachel Zimmerman?" Instead of answering, Rachel rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips gently to his. The kiss was brief but perfect, a promise, a beginning, a confirmation of everything they had come to mean to each other. When they parted, Isaac rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed as if savoring the moment. "I want to marry you," he said softly. "Not tomorrow or next week, but soon. When you're fully recovered, when I've spoken to your father, when I can offer you a proper home." "Yes," Rachel answered without hesitation. "Whenever you ask, my answer will be yes." The sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon, casting long shadows across the meadow and painting the sky in deepening shades of gold and pink. Reluctantly, Isaac led Rachel back to the buggy, knowing they needed to return to town before dark as promised. The journey back to Clifton Hill passed in a contented silence, both of them wrapped in the glow of newly declared love and the certainty of a shared future. As they approached the town, Rachel leaned her head against Isaac's shoulder, grateful for every circumstance that had brought them together, even her illness, which had revealed the true nature of those around her and the strength within herself. "What are you thinking?" Isaac asked as the first buildings of Clifton Hill came into view. "That sometimes blessings come disguised as trials," she replied. "If I hadn't fallen ill, would you have ever told me how you felt?" Isaac considered this for a moment. "Eventually," he decided, "though perhaps not as quickly. Your illness forced us both to recognize what matters most in life." "And what is that?" she asked, though she already knew his answer. "Love," he said simply. "The courage to believe in someone else and the gift of having them believe in you." As Isaac drew the buggy to a stop in front of the Zimmerman home, the last light of day gilding the modest building in golden hues, Rachel knew with absolute certainty that her life had changed irrevocably, not because of the illness that had threatened it, but because of the love that had saved it. In the years that followed, the story of Rachel Zimmerman and Isaac Edwards became something of a legend in Clifton Hill. How a mysterious illness had struck the shopkeeper's daughter, how the town doctor had dismissed her symptoms, and how a ranch hand from Colorado had stood by her side, insisting, "I believe you." They were married the following spring, once Rachel had fully recovered and Isaac had saved enough to purchase a small property on the outskirts of town. It wasn't a large wedding, but nearly everyone in Clifton Hill attended, including Dr. Livingston, who had relocated his practice to Helena but returned specially for the occasion. Dr. Harrison was conspicuously absent, having left Clifton Hill shortly after Rachel's diagnosis was confirmed. The town now boasted a younger physician who had trained in Philadelphia, and who treated his female patients with the same respect he accorded the men. Isaac continued working at the Morgan Ranch while also developing their own land, building a comfortable home with his own hands and Rachel's practical guidance. Rachel divided her time between helping at her parents' store and establishing their household, her strength returning fully with each passing month. When their first child was born a year after their marriage, a robust boy they named David, after Rachel's father, the entire town celebrated. The baby was followed 2 years later by a daughter, Grace, whose arrival coincided with the expansion of the Edwards property to include a small but thriving horse breeding operation. Life wasn't without challenges. Rachel experienced a recurrence of rheumatic fever when Grace was 3, though the symptoms were milder and Dr. Wilson recognized them immediately. Isaac weathered a difficult year when drought threatened their livelihood, forcing him to make hard decisions about their stock. Through it all, however, they faced each obstacle together, with the same unwavering belief in each other that had marked the beginning of their relationship. When difficulties arose, they would remind each other of that meadow on the eastern ridge, where love had been declared amid wildflowers and golden light. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Isaac surprised Rachel by taking her back to that same meadow. They rode out early in the morning, leaving David and Grace in the care of Martha Zimmerman, who doted on her grandchildren with unabashed delight. The meadow was as beautiful as Rachel remembered, though the perspective had changed. What had once seemed vast now felt intimate, a private sanctuary in a world that had grown increasingly busy and complex. "You remember what I said to you here?" Isaac asked as they spread a blanket in the center of the clearing, the summer sun warm on their faces. "That you saw me," Rachel replied, reaching for his hand. "And what you saw was the woman you loved." Isaac nodded, his eyes still as bright and clear as they had been that day a decade earlier. "I see you even more clearly now, Rachel Edwards. I see the mother of my children, the partner in my dreams, the heart of our home." Rachel leaned into his embrace, grateful for the life they had built together. "And I see you, the man who believed when no one else would, who fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself." "I'd do it all again," Isaac declared, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Every moment. Even the difficult ones," she teased, knowing the answer, "especially those," he confirmed. "They're what made us who we are together." As they sat in companionable silence, watching clouds drift across the Montana sky, Rachel reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From a sick where she had fought for recognition of her suffering, to a meadow where love had been declared, to a life richer and fuller than she had ever imagined possible. All because a cowboy had stayed by her bed and said 3 simple words: "I believe you."